Just as a reminder, you can visit us at thepandapod.com. That's thepandapod.com to grab our RSS feed, listen directly, and share PandaPod with your family and friends. You can also reach us directly via email through podcast@thepandapod.com. Thanks for listening.
Ever felt like you're wandering through a world that doesn't quite fit? Like you're a square peg being nudged into a round hole? Maybe you've caught yourself gazing up at the stars, pondering the mysteries that seem to slip through the fingers of conventional wisdom. Do esoteric beliefs resonate with you more than everyday chatter? Is there a voice inside you whispering that there's infinitely more to this universe than what meets our 3D eyes? If any of this sounds familiar, if any of these questions stir something deep within you, then you might just be the alien we're looking for. This isn't about being from another planet. It's about feeling like you're out of place in this one. It's about believing in the extraordinary, the spaces between. So tell us, do you feel that call, that pull towards something, somewhere that defies the ordinary? If so, welcome. Your mothership, Hot Alien Summer Camp, is calling you home. Are you ready to answer that call? To step into a space where your unique beliefs aren't just accepted but celebrated? Imagine a place where the extraordinary is the norm and the mysteries of the cosmos are the evening's main topic of discussion. A retreat where every workshop, every activity, and every shared meal is an opportunity to explore what lies beyond our conventional 3D experience. Did you find yourself nodding along just then? Feeling that spark of excitement at the thought of connecting with others who share your curiosity for the unknown? Then it's no coincidence you're hearing this right now. This is your invitation to join us, to become a part of a community that doesn't just ask the big questions, but revels in them. And what's a gathering of aliens without a little interstellar entertainment? Prepare to laugh with beings who understand your humor, as we bring you live comedy from cosmic minds of Ryan Singer and paranormal Karen Rontowski. Their insights and wit are as boundless as the universe, promising an experience that's as enlightening as it is hilarious. So, if you're ready to leave behind the world of round holes for a place where every square peg finds its place, a Hot Alien Summer Camp awaits. From August 8th through 11th in Lebanon, Tennessee, we're not just creating a retreat. We're forming a constellation of like-minded souls, each shining their unique light. Are you one of us? Are you ready to explore the depths of your alien soul among friends who understand that it's time to beat 'em up to Hot Alien Summer Camp? Your space in the cosmos is reserved. All you need to do is claim it. Visit hotaliensummercamp.com. Pre-sale tickets are on sale now. Let's embark on this cosmic journey together.
Welcome everybody to this episode of the Panda Pod, Thoughts Expanded. Today we're going to talk a little bit about freedom of speech, what we think about it, and where it is in the world right now. There's a lot of topical things we're gonna hit on, but also just like I said, what we think about it. Today we're here with the normal compatriots, Rab.
Hey there.
And Jeff. And Jeff also has the right not to say anything. So that's a thing too.
You always have the right to remain silent.
I don't want you guys to use anything against me in the court of law.
I mean, hey, rights are rights. We're here for it. This platform supports rights. You know, podcasting is really important these days. At least I think so.
That's why I'm getting my degree in podcasting law, so I can hold anything Jeff says against him.
You know, I wonder if that's the thing you can learn on like Udemy.
Yeah, I'm getting a master's in podcasting law as we speak.
That's actually why I got my degree in bird law, was so that I could hold birds against me.
Are you saying you're Birdman, attorney at law?
Yes. And you will address me as such for the rest of this episode.
All right, Birdman. Freedom of speech. It's something that's super important to me specifically. I don't like being limited in things that I can or I can't say. I also don't like it when other people are limited in what they can and can't say. I I find like if you limit people, or even if you limit yourself, we're going to miss out on the things that are important. There's the counter argument to that is that there's things that people can say that hurt other people. I mean, words are powerful, and we go right along with that every time we release an episode. I mean, words are powerful. So what are your thoughts around where freedom of speech stands today in regards to Western civilization? Like, so Western civilization was really built on freedom of speech, and
Was
I
it?
feel like it's really. I feel like it was.
Well, and
But
what
if you don't think so, then say so.
But maybe we should start by going back in time and
Go
suggesting
back in time.
like I mean, because when you say Western civilization, like that could either mean that you're saying that America was founded on the principles of free speech and that America's the leader of the Western world. Like that is an opinion I think could use some interrogation maybe, but like that's one option. The other one is that like ancient Greeks are like they like if Athens,
Right.
for instance, right? Like that's another meaning of that phrase. So are we talking about ancient Greeks or are we talking about modern times?
I think we're talking about more modern times, at least in my head.
Okay, so what you're saying when you say that like Western civilization like relies on freedom of speech or was founded on freedom of speech, you mean like American Revolution on kind of?
Yeah. American Revolution on, definitely.
Gotcha. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, I really don't think the term Western civilization counts here because like Canada doesn't have freedom of speech. You know, like it's kind of just America. I'm not even sure that Mexico does. Honestly.
Well, I'm not and I think the point that I'm really trying to make is I don't think we do anymore either.
I think we totally do.
Yeah, I think to determine whether we do or not, and also we're going to need to figure out exactly what it is. But I think it may be worth investigating, like, did we have it at that legendary founding moment or not? Maybe first
Right.
we should talk about what we think it is, but also like did we actually have it in the past? I think is a valid question.
Yeah, has it ever really existed in the way that I imagine, Wiggs, you are thinking about it right now? So maybe it's best to start with Wiggy. Why don't you give your definition of freedom of speech? Like, what does the right to freedom of speech mean to you?
Well, it means a couple of things. So there's the entire the entire idea of you can't have true freedom without the ability to say what's on your mind. And censorship leads to forms of government and forms of society that are much more restricting and lead down paths of control, i.e., fascism, right? The other aspect of it to me is more as far as social discourse and society is concerned. The idea that instead of saying what you want to say and then have somebody have a counter argument to you and you listen to them and then decide, you can make a decision based on more information than you may have had before and maybe even change your mind about a topic is something that I think is really important. And you don't get that when you are silenced.
Sure.
Those are both of my things. I don't think the Revolutionary War would have happened if they didn't feel like they had the freedom to write the Declaration of Independence in the first place.
Sure. Well, I mean, you do have to, if you're just talking about that moment, I mean, did they actually have that freedom or did they seize it? I mean, that's really, like, they seized the freedom. They didn't have that freedom.
Sure.
I mean, they did exercise it. So I guess in some sense they had it, but like, they weren't supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But but also, what kind of came to my mind as I was listening to your thoughts is I do think that maybe there is not necessarily in what you said, but kind of in general, just like some confusion about like what does it mean to have freedom to say what you want? Like, I think to who is a big question. Like obviously, it's pretty much impossible to like outlaw talking to yourself in a closet, obviously, right? I mean, that's the extreme example. But like, I mean, I think that I think there might be two categories of freedom of speech, and I think that you could kind of break down like what, like maybe we can come up with some useful thoughts based on this. Like there's like do the low classes or like lesser classes, I guess, have the right to say what they're thinking, and do like the upper rungs of society have the right to like say what they're thinking? I feel like those two different things, like that varies a lot as you like look over history. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And I guess I'm not sure if we're supposed to be like, I guess maybe the two sides for me are we supposed to be saying this is a problem with the government, or are we saying that this is a problem with society?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So like, who's actually doing the restricting? Like, if we're just talking about laws, that's different than if we're talking about like, you could say what you want, but people don't have to accept it. That's another like. I guess probably we might as well throw that part out, right, and just talk about like laws, because I mean, there's nothing you can do about if society wants to restrict what you say by like shunning you. Like there's not much you can do about that, I would say.
Right. But I think that in America, we really do have pretty free speech on a governmental level, though.
Right.
Like there's not much the government will stop you from saying. In fact, I can't think really of, anything
That's
that the
for you.
government saying. What's that?
So government's overreach into the social media platforms, them stifling news stories and making sure that things didn't get the reach that it would have gotten naturally by making them shadow ban people and things like that.
Yeah, but I feel like that is not a government thing. I feel like that is people in corporations doing bidding that maybe is helping the government, but the government does not say that we can't say things.
That's what the Twitter files were about.
Yeah, and I do think that the Twitter files were like real to some degree, in the sense that like I definitely think that there's some people at the CIA or the FBI who directly contact social media companies and like have some control over how certain topics get upvoted or downvoted to some degree, right? Like how they get seen or not seen. I think that, I mean, maybe they do it indirectly, like by like maybe Facebook uses a keywording company or something like that to do their work, and that's actually a CIA cutout where they get like an API. Facebook makes an API call and like sees if those keywords are positive or negative, like that type of thing. I think that's probably going on at a rampant level.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have influence. I mean, the question is how much, for sure. That's always the question, right? How much? But I mean, it's fairly well documented that they did this stuff, and like, so in that effect, no, they did not break any law. No, they did not, create a new law, saying that, certain things could not be discussed. So as far as a law standpoint, no, there's no laws restricting free speech. However, at least that I'm aware of. But they have, through agencies, done stuff like this, right? So on that side, I definitely think that there has been some, and that's a problem. Even if like we can take let's just take the big example, right? Just say we're talking about Trump, for example, right? I would much rather be able to have a discussion with somebody about it than have it be neutered in its cradle, because I'd rather have the chance to explain to somebody why something may be a bad idea. I'm not saying it is or isn't. I'm just saying, as an example, like I would like the opportunity, like as a society, to have the conversation with them and see whether so the way that they are, or the way that they think.
But I mean, who's stopping you from doing that? I don't think it's the government stopping you from doing that. I think it's society, as like American culture as a whole, kind of doing that.
Like, I think that it's to mention Trump in particular is interesting. Like, I do think that like Cambridge Analytica and the stuff that happened with Trump getting elected is like proof that this goes on to some degree, because I mean, like, if a presidential candidate engages with a platform to like, basically try to get extra votes that way, I mean, that is like doing a huge ad buy like that gives you some control over what Facebook does. And like, it makes you a stakeholder in a way, right? Like, I feel like that's proof of the fact that like the government is involved. It just may not be that they're going to come to your house and arrest you if you say something bad.
And I think we're definitely going to get to that society point you're trying to make, Jeff. I think there's a lot more we can talk about on that particular subject. Before we get there, since we're talking about ad revenue, one of the big questions of the past decade, maybe 2 decades, I don't remember when it happened. I think it was in the 2000s, when the Supreme Court listed money as free speech, and that corporations are people when it comes to like policy, like donations to like political candidates and stuff, like that. Like, money is free, money is speech now. I've got a pretty big problem with that.
I think money's always been speech, though. Like, money talks. That's been a phrase for a long time.
Yeah.
And how you use your money says a lot about who you are and what you believe.
Yeah, and I think that it goes back to what the way I was trying to divide up these two things. I feel like it is, in a way, it's like for there to be a meaningful power like of propaganda, the lower class has to be somewhat restricted in what they can say. Like, what they can say can't be like, it can't be totally equal to the upper class, or else like that falls apart, right? I mean, like, there has to be some level of control, or else it's meaningless in a way to have that like greater voice. Like, it has to be greater in relative to something else, right? Like, in order for there to be maintained elite power, there has to be maintained elite like media hegemony, right? But not that doesn't mean that you can't say what you want, but like, you're just also like saying it to less people than like CNN. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when I think about that, I think about riots, and I think about protests. I think that's really the only two versions that our lower class gets as an option, in opposed to the money. I mean, people have to come in droves in support of something, and you still may not get any movement. Whereas money really does make the world spin. you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe what you're getting at is like, at least in the U.S. today, it seems like you can say what you want if you're not intending to act on it, and you will not get arrested for that. Like, I feel like that's true, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that right now. I mean, we're seeing that right now with the protests that are going on in the college campuses.
Right. The key being there that they actually act on it, so it's that makes things somewhat different. It puts them into a different category. I guess that's all I'm trying to say. We will be abusing those protesters if all they did was make a Twitter post about it.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Maybe we should talk a little bit like what actually happened, because I mean, I'm in the loop somewhat, but like I feel like I'm not super in the loop. So why don't you give your view of it if that's fine with you?
Yeah. So essentially, what I've seen is I've seen in college campuses what's happening is they're taking over like the green area that's like in the middle of all these big campuses, right?
Right.
Like the lawn areas, and they're doing like sit-ins, right? So they're taking a portion of the campus that isn't really being used for anything. It's normally where people just sit or hang out or play games or whatever the case may be, right? And so they're sitting there and they're making like mini camps where they're saying, okay, like we're going to protest and we're going to sit here and we're going to, sing a song about how we're protesting or whatever the case may be. The schools are telling people that, they started off telling them that, they've got until such and such time until they're suspended. And then they tell them like, okay, well, now you've got so and such time until you're expelled. And then what winds up happening is they call in the local police, or they call in their SWAT team. There's even been like state guards that have been like the state guards been called in, and because they don't get up and disperse, they get arrested. So there hasn't been, at least as far as I've seen, I haven't seen any violence. It's just purely get off my lawn.
Well, I mean, but it's an inherently violent act to have to arrest protesters.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, what I'm saying is that I don't think the protesters are doing violence.
They're not fighting back, is what you're saying.
Right. They're just getting arrested. I mean, I'm sure there's been a couple scuffles.
Sure.
Hey, like you don't go to arrest somebody and when they're that passionate about something and not get a couple fists thrown, but like they're not. I mean, that's their choice to fight a cop or not. They're not wrecking the campus. They're not causing destruction. They're not doing any of those things. But they are getting arrested, and it's happening, and it's spreading. Like the protests are spreading. The police, the police involvement is also spreading, and so that's just another like, do you really have freedom? And liberal colleges are where historically a lot of protests have started, and where they've been meaningful to society. And so I'm not picking a side here, by the way. I'm just saying that, historically, that's where protests start a lot of the times. And so to see this like police reaction so quickly is very startling to me, especially since they're not causing damage or anything. It's not a riot.
From what I've gathered, though, it's not that they're they're only coming in to arrest the people that they're expelling, and therefore no longer have a right to be in that area anymore, though, correct? Like from what I understand.
From what I've seen, yes and no, that they're expelling the people who are being arrested. I don't know if it's happening before or after, but I do know that the people are being arrested are being expelled. So I don't know if it's happening beforehand or if it's happening after. But also, why are you expelling people or suspending people when they're just exercising their right to protest?
Well, that, and also, like, I mean, I reject the framing that they don't have a right to be there if they're expelled. I mean,
Sure.
they really should be able to occupy a college campus, especially outside. I mean, it's not stopping people from getting to class, in my understanding, at least.
Yeah, so that's to your point previously that you can't have the lower class speak. I mean, I don't know whether or not college students count as lower class if they're going to a college that's like a top 20 college. Like, what you're also not giving people their opportunity. And like, I think there should be some kind of duration limit, right? Like, your protest shouldn't go on for like a month, right? Like, if you're doing a week or you're doing like 2 weeks, like, personally, I think that's probably fine. But like, that's plenty enough time for you to get your word out and get your point across, right?
I'm just not sure that's the point of their protest, though. It's not just to get a point across. They want their schools to stop funding the cause.
Be funded by.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And until they get that satisfaction of that happening, they're not going to leave. That's the point of a protest. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to go sit here for 2 weeks, and then the school's just going to be like, okay, well, we're just going to wait it out until you're gone. You have to stay. That's the point.
Yeah.
I mean, and by staying, they are doing something that does, I mean, you can, I certainly am not trying to make a moral argument here, but I'm just trying to say, like, they are literally damaging school property just by staying there in a way, because, I mean, the grounds
Sure,
are able to do their job, and that's like part of the property value theoretically, is that like the grounds are well kept and clean and what have you. So, I mean, right or wrong, I certainly come down the side that they have a right to be there and a right to protest and a right to stay. Still, I mean, like, it does do something to the school.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, like Jeff said before, like, just because you say something doesn't necessarily mean that anybody has to listen to you either, right? Like there is that, and I think that it applies in the circumstance to a degree, but I think that applies to all, like, all instances of what's the word that's just flown out of my head? What is it? Protests. Yeah. Like, anybody who's like doing a protest like that. I mean, people do have the right not to listen to you. I think that people should, and there should be discussions on it. I mean, that's my way. But like, people don't have to listen to you. They have the freedom to do that too.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, like, at the point, like, I'm sure now that I say that they haven't been, like, disrupting class, like, I feel like that's probably not true. I feel like if they were trying to be effective, they would organize, like, sit-ins and make it so that class could not be held, right?
I don't know if they've done that or not, but you would imagine.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, let's say that they did. Like, do we feel like that's wrong? Like, is it wrong to force yourself to be heard if you feel that strongly about an issue by, like, disrupting?
Oh, certainly not. No. I don't think any of us here would argue that it's wrong to protest. Like, even when I was talking about why they were having people arrested, the only reason I brought that up was I was like, okay, well, maybe they're finding like a loophole to get the police involved. But because I don't see this as something like I maybe I'm wrong. Again, I could be, ill-informed on this, but I don't believe the governments, like local or national, have intervened in some way in this. Well, you mentioned maybe state police.
The police getting involved is the government, though. I mean, that's the government getting involved.
Sure. I mean, right, but at the behest of the school, though.
Yeah,
You know,
maybe
like
the school is making a legal justification for it, but like they're still getting. Yeah, I mean, I guess they're maybe you're saying they're the ones acting. The school's the one acting, and I think I agree with you there.
yeah,
Yeah, they're getting involved at the behest of the schools.
right. So yeah, well, I certainly don't think it's wrong to protest. I think it's like the greatest tool humanity has to fight systems bigger than themselves, you know. So yeah, I mean, of course, I think that's correct, and I think pretty much all forms of protest are correct.
Well, yeah, so I mean, like all forms of protest. So like, I mean, them staying in the ground's fine. Like we all agree that's fine. But like, they can. I mean, you could argue that like, I don't know, them kidnapping the dean would be a form of protest, right? I mean, like, are you? I'm not trying to ask you to like decide if people should be allowed to commit crimes or not, but like,
Right.
how do you feel about stuff like that?
I mean, I would say that as long as what you're doing doesn't have like a harmful effect on others. Although you could argue that a protest, like a sit-in protest, does because it, deprives people of the education they're paying for, But I guess kidnapping someone's just a little more violent than I personally would find acceptable.
I would argue that the foundation of our country was based on doing the protest when you're not allowed to do it.
Right.
And so like if that means, and we talked about this earlier, speaking on like the revolution, like that was very violent. And people had to fight to make that change. And so, I mean, I think that that's acceptable. Now, does everything come down to circumstance? I think so. I think you have to be sensible, like you're saying. Like, I don't think doing something like that to, like kidnapping somebody. I don't think kidnapping somebody's still but I do think that on principle, they would have the right to do what they need to do. I think it's just situational. I mean, the George Floyd protests, for example. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because there's a lot of things that go into that. But like some of those protests were a lot more violent. And as far as I'm concerned, rightfully so. But, like, I think it depends on circumstance.
Yeah, so I guess really what we're saying is like violent protests, nonviolent protests, like it's mostly dependent on whether or not like the cause is just. And like, I mean, I would say to some degree it has to do with like if the violence will actually accomplish something, like kidnapping one dean probably isn't going to change anything. But like if you get together with all the other student organizers and like figure out a way to coordinate a plan to do something like that, like maybe that actually has a real effect.
Maybe if you kidnapped all the deans. Yeah.
And just go a step further and kidnap everybody named Dean as well.
Everybody named Dean. No deans are safe here. We do not recommend violence here at the Panda Pod.
Definitely not violent against deans. I cannot abide a hurting a dean.
I had a friend named Dean, and he doesn't deserve that.
Yeah, so. Deans deserve better, guys.
So speaking of about the protests, so where I saw the protests and where I got most of my information from was TikTok, right? That's really where a lot of news comes from that isn't necessarily on big platforms or being highlighted by big platforms. I know it's being talked about on mainstream media. I know Fox is talking about it. I know CNN's talking about it, right? But we're also not getting those point of views from the people who are there, right? We're getting that high level. This is kind of what's going on, and you don't really get the details. Whereas I'm sure there's some people just making stuff up, right? So information has to come with a filter of there's a reason behind it, right? There could be a reason of just someone just speaking their truth of what they're seeing. There could be somebody who's making videos just because they want to be famous on TikTok, right? Oh, you've got to be cautious about the information you're getting, but there's efforts to remove platforms as well, right? Like the government is doing its damned best to make sure that TikTok doesn't operate in the USA anymore.
At least in its current form.
I just can't get on board with linking the TikTok thing to silencing free speech, because I don't think that's what it's about at all. You know,
it's not about that at all. It's not about that at all. But it is a side effect.
Wait. Why do you say it's not about free speech, Jeff?
Well, I don't think it's about suppressing free speech. I think it's about gathering as much information as we can for our own use internally here in the US.
So you're saying that that the problem they have with TikTok is that it doesn't do data collection and then feed that to like the US state apparatus, if not the government directly.
Right. Yeah. Which is why they don't want to shut it down. They're just telling them, hey, sell it to someone who will give us the information. Like they're giving them, they signed it today, I'm pretty sure. And it gives them like 9 months or something to find a buyer, and the thing is, as far as I can see, it won't stop China from getting the information. Even if they sell, if ByteDance sells the TikTok or whatever, like the algorithm still belongs to whatever firm is hosting the servers in China.
Wait, is that true though? Because I think that the point of it was that they were going to sell just the U.S. portion to a U.S. company. That was like that's the threat. They have to do that or they get banned.
Right, but that doesn't include the algorithm. So if they do that,
they have a carve out for the algorithm.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it doesn't include the algorithm.
Oh, so
I've read.
Yeah. ByteDance owns the algorithm, and ByteDance is supposedly under the thumb of the rules of the CCP. And the CCP has come out and said that that algorithm is not allowed to be sold, essentially.
Right.
So, one, we want the algorithm. Two, TikTok is a giant competitor of Facebook and Instagram.
Sure.
And so, just for some background information, the guy who wrote the bill to try to force the sale, not only right before he submitted it, but since he submitted that bill, he's been buying stock in Facebook.
Right.
Regularly. So there's also this like monetary thing on the side of it as well. But going back to Jeff's point about the algorithm, it's really not about the data. I mean, the company that owns TikTok in the US come out and said that their data centers are in the US. And if we believe if we think that that's true, then there's nothing stopping it's already enclosed, right? With every other data center that is being used in the United States, right? Whether or not that's AWS or whatever Google uses or whoever it is that's hosting their data, right? It's already in the US. So why are they really trying to force the sale? And I really think it's just because a lot of Congress people and senators have a lot of money depending, like in Meta.
So they're assuming
And-
Meta's going to buy it. If assuming that it doesn't get shut down, Meta's going to buy it, and either way, Meta wins. Is that what you're saying?
But even if they don't, but they're able to stop TikTok from being used in the United States, Instagram's going to blow up again.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I actually think it's probably worth talking about, like, I mean, we were talking earlier about the government not directly influencing social media, but I mean, I would say it goes the other way around too. Like, I think those congressional trials that like Mark Zuckerberg had to go through and whatever were like basically the last gasp of that establishment not being in a way like dominant, at least somewhat, to the interests of like Facebook and Google and what have you.
I mean, it's all a leverage game.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think they have a lot of say over what happens in DC. So, I mean, like, it's not just that like the CIA like might influence what happens on Facebook or Twitter, what have you. It's also the other way around, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's quid pro quo. 100%. I mean, they're influencing our government. The government's influencing them. They come upon agreements to allow them to do both, right? Like, remember what was the bill that was passed that stopped us from getting like the free internet? Do you remember? You know what I'm talking about, Jeff? Remember when they passed that bill from dang it, what was that?
Net neutrality.
Net neutrality, right? Like, that was piggybacked by tech companies.
Sure.
Right? Like 1000% they paid for that. You know, when everybody in the country who paid any kind of attention to it wanted it.
Sure.
You know, so this has been going on for a while, and it's the money. It all comes back down to the money, and why, you know, money's free speech now. And like, I don't think there's the same limitation on money as there is on human voice. Whereas people aren't getting arrested for these things because they built it into their laws, right? It's okay for Congress people to bet on the stock market when they know what's going to happen in it. But if a college student decides that they want to throw a protest, they get arrested, right? Like, it's not the same. Money and people's voices are not held at the same standard.
Right.
Like, so it's a problem. And I don't think, like you're saying, Jeff, I don't think free speech is the reason why they're going after TikTok, but it's also a side effect, because if the government and the social media companies are scratching each other's backs to get to the point where they can influence each other, and TikTok's not playing that game, and that's why they want them out, that really just goes to prove that they are silencing, as a side effect, they're silencing freedom of speech, because we don't have a platform to do it on, unless you want to go to X and deal with Musk's crazy shit, right? Like, what choice do you have?
I guess I just don't see it as targeting free speech in any way, because they don't care if you're watching videos. You know, they do definitely care where you're watching videos, you know, and so to, you know, your point, yeah, that's for sure true. But they want you watching videos, you know, they want to opiate the masses. They just want to be able to gather the data on what's going to do that best, and they can't do that with TikTok, you know. So, like, I just see this TikTok ban going into place, and somebody probably buys it, even though there's not a lot of a reason to buy it without the algorithm. Like, it'll fail, but I mean, all those viewers are just going to go somewhere else, and I mean, they're winning either way here.
I see. So, Jeff, you're saying that they'll buy it and not have the access to the algorithm anymore, and thus
It's just a name, and they'll have some kind of video, you know, platform, but it won't have that amazing algorithm behind it.
So if Google bought it, for instance, and just like they basically took all the US creators and made them into YouTube videos and used the YouTube algorithm, like that would potentially be workable. Like people might actually continue to use TikTok just because they like the format and like the look of it or something.
Sure. Yeah. But I think more than likely what'll happen is that someone, some third party will buy it that's smaller, thinking that they're getting a great deal, and it won't do well because they don't have that algorithm, and everybody will just migrate to something else, probably Meta, like you said, probably Instagram, maybe YouTube Shorts, who knows? But the government's not trying to stop you from watching videos, that's for sure.
Well, I don't think they're trying to stop us from watching videos, but we could argue that they are trying to stop us from watching particular videos. For example, RFK Jr. The only places that he pops up right now is in podcasts and on TikTok.
I mean, he's all over my YouTube.
Is he all over your YouTube?
Newsfeed. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen him there. But if you have, that's actually good. Like I praise that. Like that's amazing.
Yeah. I think that's just about your personal algorithm that you build. It could be you're wanting to look,
Yeah, and ultimately the algorithm, the point of each algorithm here is, we can make a debate about TikTok, but the point of the YouTube algorithm, the Facebook algorithm, etc., is to make a company money. That is the point. So if the algorithm, like, obviously hid content from you that you wanted to see, like, that would send people away, and therefore it's unacceptable, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I won't deny that the CIA probably is like, no, it's absolutely fucking with, the availability of things to people. They're definitely trying to, suppress whatever they can suppress. But,
well, consider just the platform of Patreon, right? Like, a lot of YouTubers get funded through Patreon or like small content creators. And it's so easy at that point to just boost the voices you're interested in, amplifying, right? For a very low amount of money.
Mm-hmm. I would say the same thing for like Nebula, which is another streaming service kind of akin to YouTube, where, independent creators get, I think it's basically a co-op with independent creators. So, yeah, there are definitely avenues that you can take to get around that suppression. Patreon really is a great one. Like, it's so good, just being able to directly connect with, individuals and hear their thoughts on things.
Yeah, I think Patreon's great too in general. Like, I think that leads to more media I think the media is more democratized with Patreon than without. But what I was saying about Patreon is just that, like for a very low amount of money, a interested party, let's say, it doesn't have to be the government, could decide, like, okay, for $40,000 a year, we're going to invest in these pre-approved Patreons that are looking like they're kind of saying what we want, and we're going to do it in low dollar amounts so that nobody knows what's up, but like funding effectively the media that they want out there.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, sorry, I missed that the first time around. Yeah, that certainly is an interesting method of doing that. Although that really depends on the people taking that money from Patreon and using it outside of Patreon.
Sure. Well, yeah, basically, if you have more money in your pocket, you have more to spend on a good camera and recording, right, and what have you, right? So, I think that, and that leads to being more popular in the YouTube algorithm. So, I think that there's lots of ways for them to influence what is shown to you that doesn't, like, it's not necessarily that they're just like, pulling the strings at Google when they hide stuff. If your YouTube page is covered in RFK stuff, like, it's more likely to be covered in the more like powerful and popular YouTubers that cover it, right?
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and you could say the same thing about Substack as well.
Sure.
You know, the Substack's platform for, you know, giving independent journalists and I don't really think podcasts are moving over there, even though they've tried their damnedest to get good podcasts over there. But I mean, it's definitely a source of where you could get more independent news and support the creators you like. But I mean, who's saying that same thing that Rab that you just said isn't going on over there either?
Sure.
You know,
I mean, I think it would, by definition, be happening everywhere. I mean, and you can be certain that it is happening. The question is, like, how much of an effect is it having?
well, I mean, if we want to take the extreme for that example, we can look at mainstream media.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you go back in time, I mean, going back in time to the American Revolution, I think one really interesting point is that, like, the American revolutionaries, like, if they caught people publishing pro-British pamphlets, like, you got in trouble for that. Like, they were still, like, in the territories they controlled, arresting people for voicing their free opinions.
While also employing pirates.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, like, they, I guess where I was going, what was the point you were making right when I said that? I'm sorry.
Oh, we were talking about mainstream media.
Oh, yeah.
They can also be affected.
So how it relates to mainstream media is, like, the mainstream media at the time was newspapers, right? And so I think that the level, like, the technology has changed over time, and it's become easier and easier to disseminate information, like, and therefore, like, less of a cost to get into it. I think that trend has gone over time. It's been cheaper and cheaper for, like, in an individual, let's say, to get involved in producing media. But at the same time, like, the points of control have become less and less. Like, when it was a newspaper, there were, like, you know, thousands of newspapers, and then there became, you know, thousands of TV stations, and then eventually those got all bought up by a few companies, and then eventually, you know, we move on to social media, where it's like an algorithm controlled by, like, you know, a couple handfuls of people.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, you know, and honestly, it all comes down to how much power money has in our society. Like, you know, I'm not going to be one of them people that are saying, like, money's like the root of greed or whatever, but it's definitely a tool of the disingenuous. And it's being used everywhere to try to influence what we think and what we talk about and what we self-censor. You know, I mean, society does more to get people to self-censor than money does, for sure. But, like, what we see, you know, what's being given to us, you know, that's all being filtered and controlled by groups of people who don't want us all to know the truth. And if we don't know what the truth is, how can we talk about it? And how can we talk about it meaningfully? You know? And that's really where I come back to when I talk about, like, my view on freedom of speech. Like, if you restrict or don't provide necessary information, how are we supposed to have meaningful conversations that lead to meaningful results? You know, like, it's so important for a society to have those conversations so that we can move to somewhere good and meaningful and prosperous. But we're being cut off at the kneecaps, I feel like. And, you know, it's hard to talk about this if you don't think it's being done to you directly, right? Like, if you don't really feel like that's happening to you, then, you know, God bless, right? But I think it's important to think about that it is happening widely. And they're not even trying to hide it anymore.
Wait, what do you mean that happening widely?
Like like we've discussed, like it's happening in social media, it's happening
Oh,
in
you mean like government
mainstream media.
control or like censorship of information through, whatever means are available, whether that's like boosting certain people's content or anything else like that. You're talking about that happening?
I mean, whether or not that's being done by the corporations, whether or not that's being done by the government, whether that's being done by, a select few that have a voice, right? Like however you look at it, they're really doing their best to market the shit out of people, and it's all about money. Um, that's really my point, and it's really it's depressing to me how much there's nothing stopping us three from sitting in a room or talking over Discord and having a conversation about something. There's nothing stopping that, but in the world that we live in right now, social media is really our town square in our bars, right?
Right.
Like, even though people can't seem to stay civil, and that's a whole nother topic. Like that's where we have to try to get our points across, and it's not a good tool for it in the first place, but it's what we have. And if we're being, like I said, if we're being cut off at the knees, then what hope do we have?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess maybe that's a place we can bring the conversation. Like, where could we go from here? Like, what would a positive vision look like for this kind of stuff? Like, are we thinking, I mean, like one example, for instance, would be if a body that like had the public's interest in mind truly, so obviously not the current U.S. government, but like somebody that we trusted to have the public's interest in mind, took control of these social media algorithms and like effectively excise the bad parts. Like, is that good enough of a positive vision, or do you guys have your own ideas of like what might occur to get us out of this situation?
Well, I think we'd have to have a whole other conversation about the dangers of free speech before we could really, like, before I could come to a conclusion on what like a good version of it looks like. Because there are like dangers of having anyone say anything anywhere.
Yeah, that's certainly
and, like, I don't know that it should ever be suppressed. I don't know. Like, that's something I don't know that I've ever really like figured out inside of myself whether I believe what I believe on that. But because like in my gut, when you first say it, my first thing was thinking, well, just pure anarchy, like let people say what they want to say. But then like I did get like a tenseness in my gut, and I was like, no, that doesn't sound good. I don't want that to happen, because I mean that can lead to some like disastrous consequences. Very charismatic people can convince very persuadable people to do really awful things in those situations. So I'm not sure what it looks like. Maybe an ethical body, maybe like a third party ethical body that, yeah, it does have, our best interest at heart. Although, I mean, who determines what those best interests are?
right. I mean, yeah, obviously, like to get to a point where you're talking about a positive vision, you have to imagine that something has occurred to put, like people back in charge, right? Like, I mean, whatever that is, I don't necessarily make a prescription about how to do that. Like, if I knew how to put people back in charge, I would definitely do it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, I have no idea like how it would be done exactly, but I feel like, if you're talking about like, I feel like you can imagine that some body potentially might be able to take those algorithms away from their current owners.
Sure.
I got a solution for you.
What's that?
AI.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of, I've seen that show, Mrs. Davis. It seems to be
Damn
conversation.
it. No, I'm watching shows on pirates right now. Okay, I'm on a pirate kick.
Okay, well, when you're ready for nuns and
I'm never ready for
really,
nuns.
really
Like,
funny
first off,
kids,
I'm never gonna be ready for nuns.
it's so good. Just watch it.
You know, I have to wait at least 3 years from the point that you tell me I need to watch or listen to something, and then I'll find it myself, and you'll say, "Hey, I told you to do that." That's how
That
this
is
relationship
my
works.
favorite quality about you, Justin. I want you to
That's fine, but that's how this
I
relationship
want you to be a better human being, and part of that is listening to me when I give you suggestions on things to watch.
I don't like direct feedback. So you saying you want me to be a better person makes me angry.
Well, there
So,
is something said about having a past recommendation to watch something. Like that does actually affect my behavior for sure. But like, it does take me a while to get around. I totally understand the impulse.
yeah. Don't tell me what to do, Jeff. I'm free.
We were talking about the
Free.
Patreon thing earlier, and I can't help but think what we on this show would need to do to get the government interested in sponsoring our Patreon.
All we gotta do is talk about how much we hate JFK.
You mean
RFK?
the government's still salty about
Yeah.
JFK?
They're still salty about JFK. They don't like RFK. You know, they assassinated RFK's dad. What was that, BFK? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think RFK's dad was another RFK technically, but
Yeah, I guess he is RFK Jr. That was a pretty stupid statement.
Well, Bobby is what he went by.
Yeah,
True.
Bobby FK Jr. That's what we need to talk about. How he's so stupid. And then they give us money. Talk about how we hate China. That's a good way to go.
Right on. Well, that was kind of a segue for us to talk a little bit at the end of the episode here about our rebranding that'll be going on this summer. In the Patreon that we will hopefully be starting at that time as well under the name Thoughts Expanded.
Yeah, so we've been talking about Thoughts Expanded and saying Thoughts Expanded so many times to get you guys used to the fact that we're saying Thoughts Expanded, and that's who we're going to be. And that was Rab's idea. So thank you, Rab.
But yeah, so any government agencies out there that are listening, I am surprisingly easy to buy off. So just hit me up. We'll work something out.
You know, government, you give me enough fuck you money to where I can say whatever I want and not get canceled for it. Sure, buy me out. That's fine.
But what if whatever you want to talk about is what they're paying you not to talk about?
We can talk about that.
Negotiate my
We can. Hey, it's freedom of speech. They tell me what they want me to say with money. I will tell them what I want to say with my words, and the one with the greater power wins. We've already talked about this.
Yeah, unfortunately, money talks.
Yeah, money wins right now. So unless we want to fix that problem, we got to find a way to fix money. But I'll also go ahead and say that everybody who has it, morals are sometimes viable. I mean, it kind of goes against everything in the world. Like when you think about that as being a thing, but people got to pay bills, and that's something that's never going to change until we figure out a way to even the score there. So if the score doesn't get even, then I got bills to pay, and I need fucking money so I can say what I want to say. So.
We'll talk about that concept more in the next communism video.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, I'll go a step further and say to any listeners thinking about subscribing to a future Patreon, we will effectively do indulgences on Money Talk. Yeah. So if you give us your money so that we can be bought off in that way, then you don't have to feel bad and your soul can go to heaven because unburdened by the idea that you're using your money to influence, other people or whatever, I guess apart from through us. So maybe that has to throw that idea out the window.
Alternatively, at the $50 tier, one of us will simply take your opinion and it will become our opinion. So, it really depends on what direction you want to go with this.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent way to go there, I think.
I go as far to say that at the $100 tier, you can give each of us an opinion that's different from the other.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And that's what we'll talk about.
Yeah, we'll do an episode where just we argue whichever 3 points of the issue you want us to cover, and we'll even scream at each other if that's what you want for $100.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fuck Jeff.
Yeah.
I started off for you.
Shit. Fuck.
Fuck.
He's not even being paid to say that.
I know.
It will be a scam.
Hold up cash, man.
That's a teaser.
Okay.
That's a teaser. That's a trailer, if you will.
Right.
Or from what we'll give up.
Yes, before, and that was I would say that was probably a 3 out of 10. Fuck Jeff. So you can purchase the 10 out of 10. Fuck Jeff
at the $10 tier. Yeah.
I'll even make a TikTok about it and send it to you. That's what you want. All right. Well, now you know what our future plans are. I think that'll cut us for today. So thank you guys so much for listening to our podcast. We really appreciate you guys. Like we said, we will have a rebrand coming up. We'll also have a what's it called? I don't forget what it's called. A Patreon. We'll also have a Patreon. And we're going to do so many more episodes. So we thank you for listening to those in advance as well. Hope you guys have a great day. Have a great rest of your week. And we will see you soon.
Bye.